Good evening. My name is Rob Lockhart, and I welcome you to tonight's broadcast from Follow Me Ministries. I'd like to begin by reading Psalm 100, that great psalm of thanksgiving. Shout joyfully to the Lord, all the earth. Serve the Lord with gladness. Come before him with joyful singing. Know that the Lord himself is God. It is he who has made us, and not we ourselves. We are his people and the sheep of his pasture. Enter his gates with thanksgiving, and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him. Bless his name, for the Lord is good. His loving kindness is everlasting, and his faithfulness to all generations. Although it's hard to believe that another year has passed, we just celebrated Thanksgiving, a time when we usually gather with family and friends to simply reflect on our lives, consider the many blessings provided, and give thanks for all we have and are able to do. Of course, this celebration is often defined by what we eat: turkey and dressing and various side dishes and pumpkin pie and pecan pie, or what we watch on television, the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade and football, and recently how we prepare for the Christmas season, putting up the Christmas tree and decorating the house, going shopping for those wonderful deals on Christmas presents. These are the traditions we practice. One tradition I have incorporated into my Thanksgiving weekend occurs on the Friday after Christmas. I usually put up our Christmas tree and begin decorating the outside of our house. Family members are oftentimes out shopping, and I work alone decorating, usually with a football game on in the background. This, in my mind, ushers in the Christmas season. Because my wife and I traveled to Jacksonville, Florida this year to celebrate Thanksgiving with our youngest daughter, I was not home on that Friday after Thanksgiving. Do I wait until we return to decorate, or do I decorate before we leave? We chose to decorate a week early for a very practical reason. Knowing how busy we would be after Thanksgiving, we thought we'd make it easier on ourselves to get the decorating out of the way before Thanksgiving. And I hear the purists in our midst: shouldn't you wait until it's actually Christmas to decorate for Christmas? Shouldn't you wait until you appropriately celebrate Thanksgiving before you move on to the next holiday? It seems the Christmas season, from a strictly market-driven perspective, begins earlier every year. Black Friday, that day when retailers apparently cut prices drastically to woo shoppers into their stores, has become our demarcation for the Christmas season. This year, this demarcation has been blurred by the fact that many stores are starting their Black Friday price cuts on Thanksgiving Day. And if we're really paying attention, we see that Black Friday is no longer a specific day, that Friday after Thanksgiving, but a concept that covers many days, perhaps even weeks. The reason for this is simple. Many retailers stay afloat by the profit earned on this one day. If they can increase their profit margin by extending the Black Friday to a week, and then they stand a much better chance of surviving the rest of the year. And although I'm not an economist or a retailer, I understand this practice completely. I'm in danger of chasing a rabbit here, for there's much to say about capitalism, or the connection between capitalism and Christianity, and how capitalism has creeped into the practices of the church. How can capitalism be of the world, and the church should exist above the world, etc.? But I hear the purists again shouting, shouldn't we wait until we at least celebrate Thanksgiving before we move on to Christmas? Aren't we essentially ignoring Thanksgiving, or at least reducing Thanksgiving to a second-class holiday by passing over it so quickly to move on to Christmas? Shouldn't we at least give thanks before anything else? To which we all shout, yes. Yes, we must first give thanks before we enter into the fray of Black Friday. I join in this chorus, but I also recognize this complaint might be exposing a basic problem with our beliefs and practices on a daily basis. Many of you remember that wonderful poem by Robert Frost called "The Road Not Taken." I know this sounds like I'm in danger of chasing another rabbit here, but stick with me just a bit. Many lift up this poem as the ultimate statement on nonconformity, that we should take the road less traveled in life and make our own way in the world. We should avoid following the crowd, that we can be in control of our own destinies by simply expressing our own individuality. It's a great poem, maybe skirting the fringes of secular humanism, but there are two wonderful lines in the poem that read, "Yet, knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back." We don't have time for a full-blown treatment of this poem tonight, but I believe these two lines express a truth about human nature that we are after all slow to accept or even understand. The speaker in the poem is faced with a choice. Upon finding a fork in the road, which road should he take? He rationalizes that the decision could be inconsequential, for he can choose the one road today, but then when he comes back, he can then choose the second road. He can essentially have both, experience both. But then those two lines appear. "Yet, knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back." The speaker in the poem must face the reality that he most likely will never be back in this place. Knowing how way leads on to way, knowing how life works, knowing how we become so consumed by what is happening in life that we seldom, if ever, get to come back to this moment. The choice for the speaker then of choosing between the roads becomes even more consequential in the end, for he will never get to experience that road not taken. Knowing how way leads on to way. We have a tendency in our lives, don't we, of putting things into boxes, figuratively, of course, of sectioning off our lives so that we can function. But during certain hours of our days, we are husbands and wives, fathers and mothers. During certain other hours of our days, we are teachers or doctors or accountants or maintenance men and women. During certain other hours of our days, we are fans of sport teams, although we have an even greater tendency to allow this part of our lives to bleed over into other sections of our lives, or sometimes we are engaged in other hobbies and interests. And this has extended into our spiritual lives, hasn't it? Only during certain hours of our weeks, for most, 1 to 2 hours, maybe 3, we attend church. For a majority of people who claim to be followers of Christ, the only spiritual activity in their lives. Or we spend an hour or so in the morning reading our Bibles and praying, which is a wonderful thing, but then close the door to that section of our lives and open the door to another section, never allowing the content of the one to enter into the content of the other. I hope you understand my point here. We have done the same thing with our spiritual holidays, haven't we? We have essentially assigned Thanksgiving to one day of the year, but we do the same thing with Christmas and Easter, don't we? The purest argument about Thanksgiving works. It makes us feel guilty because we have reduced Thanksgiving to that one day of the year. If we miss that one day, or if we allow Christmas to impede upon the day of Thanksgiving, then we have to wait until next year to get another chance. But knowing how way leads on to way, we understand on a fundamental level that next year will also be compromised. However, as blood-bought followers of Jesus Christ, Thanksgiving is not a day or a season. It cannot be placed in a box and shelved away for special times. Surrendering to the grace extended to each and every one of us by what Christ did on the cross 2,000 years ago places within our hearts a disposition toward thankfulness and thanksgiving. And then that brings us back to Psalm 100, doesn't it? Again, shout joyfully to the Lord, all the earth. Serve the Lord with gladness. Come before him with joyful singing. Know that the Lord himself is God. It is he who has made us, and not we ourselves. We are his people and the sheep of his pasture. Enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him. Bless his name. For the Lord is good. His loving kindness is everlasting, and his faithfulness to all generations. The psalmist is describing something much greater than a day of thanksgiving. He is describing something much greater than an arbitrary day set aside to memorialize that activity 400 years ago when those pilgrim families sat with their Native American friends to share a meal together. That day, rooted in both mythology and reality, was a great day, certainly, but the psalmist is speaking about something much deeper, a much deeper experience. The psalmist is speaking about the new creature, the blood-bought, spiritually new, born-again creature defined dispositionally by thanksgiving. So much so that every day of our lives is characterized by this thankfulness. Every hour, every minute, or maybe I should say every day of our lives should be characterized by this thankfulness. Through the completed and finished work of Jesus Christ on the cross, we are now at peace with God. The Bible clearly teaches us this. We were slave to sin, but have now been set free from that sin. We were dead in our sin, but now are alive. We were blind to the truth, but can now see that truth. Old things have passed away, making way for the new. We were enemies of God. We are now at peace with God. Do we truly understand what has been done for us? Do we truly understand how utterly hopeless we were in our sinful nature? And do we truly understand at the foundation of our souls how we have been saved from an eternity separated from God? And are we truly thankful? My brothers and sisters, before we can give thanks, before we feel compelled to acknowledge thanks, we must first be thankful. And so my question, my challenge to anyone and everyone listening tonight, and it's also a challenge to myself, are you thankful? I have to ask myself, am I thankful? Am I characterized by a general disposition toward thankfulness? The challenge for us all is not to give thanks on that one day of the year set aside for Thanksgiving, but that we give thanks every day of our lives to the one solely worthy of our praise and thanks. Do you awake each morning compelled to shout joyfully to the Lord? Do you serve the Lord with gladness? That same Lord who has delivered you from eternal damnation by dying on a cross in your place. We were supposed to be on that cross, and yet He died on that cross. Are we serving the Lord with gladness because of that? Do you enter His gates with thanksgiving and His courts with praise? Do you know that the Lord Himself is God? Do you understand that it is He who has made us, and not we ourselves? We are His people and the sheep of His pasture. I've said many times over the course of this past year that God is God, and we must first acknowledge that. Do you know that the Lord Himself is God? Knowing how way leads on to way, as the poet has said it so beautifully. Have you surrendered to the only way to the truth? The only way that leads to eternal salvation. Jesus tells us, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. Knowing how way leads on to way, have you surrendered yourself to this truth? Are you on the pathway to the way to this truth? Have you accepted Jesus Christ as your Savior? Jesus is the way. He's the only way. He has done all the work for each and every one of us. Have you completely surrendered to the Lord of the universe? In order for us to give thanks, we must be thankful for that one basic truth at the bottom of our hearts, the foundation of who we are. Jesus is the way. He has done all the work for each and every one of us. Have you completely surrendered to the Lord of the universe? Well, I'd like to encourage you to visit our website at www.followmeministries.net to find out more about this ministry and find ways to support its work. I also encourage you to respond to these broadcasts by submitting an online response form with your questions and comments. You can also follow us on Facebook, search for Follow Me Ministries, and click like. Again, and as always, I thank you for listening tonight. Have a blessed week, and wake each and every morning giving thanks to the one solely worthy of our praise and thanks.